Welcome to Dram Talk. I'm Brad.
And I'm Daniel.
This is episode 1, A Beast in Islay.
So this is our podcast where we will be having conversations that revolve around whiskey but aren't limited to whiskey.
Right, yeah, and really the idea for this, it's just come across Daniel and I spending maybe too many nights drinking, tasting whiskey, and our partner's kind of just sitting there listening to our conversation, going on and on and on and on about whiskey, and they've said, well...
Go and tell someone that cares. So... we decided to take that very literally. Basically, the next day we went out, bought a whole bunch of podcasting equipment, and decided to do just that.
Right, and it's just all about sharing our passion for whiskey and just our passions for anything, really, with people that care, because they don't seem to care.
Yeah, so hopefully if you're listening to this, it means you are a fan of whiskey or are maybe looking at getting into the wide world of whiskey. So please pour yourself a dram and enjoy these musings of ours.
Right, and if you're not fans of whiskey, maybe you're fans of us. So just hang around.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for our first episode, we will be reviewing Ardbeg Wee Beastie. We got an early release of this through the Ardbeg Committee, which for those of you that don't know, you can easily sign up to on their website. Doesn't cost anything. You just need to enter in your email address and they send you a whole bunch of information on special releases to the committee, some exclusive and some just early pre-releases in the case of the Wee Beastie.
Right, and it's not just limited to that as well. There's a lot of promotional stuff going on. There's a lot of videos. A lot of entertaining stuff. Looking at the Wee Beastie here, it's a 5-year-old whiskey from Ardbeg. And look, from Islay itself, that's very, very young. It might even be the youngest age statement I've actually seen on a bottle from Islay.
Yeah, I haven't come across a younger one.
Yeah, and just with this bottle here for Ardbeg, it's now a new addition to their ultimate range. So it's going to be readily available for purchase. Now, in terms of affordability, for us, it was 85 Australian dollars. And that's with $15 shipping. That bring the total to about $100.
So for anyone that's familiar with whiskey shopping in Australia, you know that $100 is basically the entry-level price you're looking at for an Islay whiskey. So we'll see when the Wee Beastie actually does hit the shelves whether it sticks to the low price point of $85, in which case it would probably be the youngest entry-level whiskey into Islay.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see if maybe this affects the price of the Ardbeg 10. So at the moment, the Ardbeg 10, you're probably looking at, I think, about $100 or so. So it'll be really interesting to see if this entry into Ardbeg's line causes that price to rise a little.
Yeah, so the other thing to note as well when the Wee Beastie arrived is it didn't come in a box. We just got the bottle itself.
Right, yeah, I was pretty surprised by that. But I don't know if that played a factor in the price of the bottle itself. And maybe you want to think, well, if I can get a bottle of Oogdal or Corryvreckan not in the box, am I saving a couple of dollars there?
I mean, like, it's just something I guess we have to wait and see whether it arrives on the shelf in a box and whether the fact that it arrived boxless to us was a matter of the pre-release. And, you know, if it does come to the shelves, we'll have to keep an eye out as to whether it, again, keeps to that price point of $85 and whether it comes in a box or not.
Yeah, and for me, I'm very interested to see how the drinkability of this whiskey is here. Because with peat in general, if you're looking at, I guess, 5 years, that's a very little time to give that peat to mellow out and mature in the cask.
Yeah, so just to give a brief background to people who aren't familiar with peated whiskey, the way whiskey does get peated is Islay, which is a small island off the west coast of Scotland, it's very wet and damp there. So when they were drying out the barley, it wasn't drying fast enough. So what they did is decided to burn peat, which is decomposed vegetable matter that is like compounded over thousands of years to form like these black layers under the ground.
Oh, delicious.
Oh, it sounds... But yeah, so what they did is they dug that up, they set that alight, and they used that to dry the barley, which is kind of confusing because I would just really love to know what was going through the first person's head that decided to dig up this patch of dirt, set it on fire, and use that to as aid in their whiskey making.
Hey, but look,
it worked.
It worked, and for everyone out there, Daniel and I were peat heads. We love it.
Absolutely. Just chasing that peat train.
Yeah, exactly. And ever since we, drank think our first whiskey from Islay has just been that, chasing the peat.
Yeah, so I'm really thankful to that first person that decided to burn dirt they dug up from the ground. But yeah, that smoke, it's like captured by the barley, travels through the entire distillation and aging process, and comes out in whiskeys that are characterized by this like smoky, fiery peat, for lack of a better way to say it. It's like this peaty taste that kind of just like coats your mouth, and it creates that, I don't know, like that feeling, that notion of comfort that you get from like sitting in front of a fire, especially on a cold winter's night.
Yeah, definitely. And just looking at this bottle of Ardbeg here, the Wee Beastie, it's a great name. I think it's alluding to what's in the bottle, hopefully. I'm hoping for a very strong, impactful whiskey. That's what I'm hoping for here.
Yeah, and what I found with it is usually when you're shopping for whiskey, you kind of associate age with quality. And so you're looking for the older, the better. And so that's the reason why a lot of whiskeys usually don't age their bottles when they're under 10 years. I mean, you occasionally see a younger one like Lagavulin release their 8-year-old, but I haven't really seen any distillers that slap on an age statement. If it's younger than that, they usually put on a fancy name, and hopefully that carries the price point up. But, you know, it's kind of exciting to see that Ardbeg have embraced their 5-year age statement with a title called the Wee Beastie, which has kind of made us very, very excited to open this bottle and give it a try.
Yeah, so let's get to the dram. All right, so for me on the nose, it's like savory meats. And look, I skipped the color straight away because I just wanted to nose this dram here.
Yeah, I mean, like the first thing you notice when you pick it up is it's a very light, which indicates that it is natural color, and kind of grateful for that. Like, you know that Ardbeg is fully embracing their younger whiskey by not trying to give it a artificial caramel color to masquerade it as an older one. They're fully embracing it, so it is natural color. It does have an age statement, calling it 5-year-old, and it's non-chill filtered.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm just going to have a look if they actually state it on the bottle here. Yeah, non-chill filtered. That's great. And that's great to see. Daniel and I love to see that on bottles. It's just like an integrity bottling. It shows that you've stuck to the process, and you're not altering any of the flavors that have gone through that, and you're just presenting something as natural and as pure as possible.
Yeah, and you know as a consumer that what you're buying is basically straight from the barrel into the bottle.
Yeah, and it's probably the best form.
Back to the nose.
For me, savory meats, I'm getting a bit of like charred wood.
Yep.
Like charred, burnt wood, savory meats. I think characteristics you'd associate with Ardbeg naturally. But they're a lot more prominent, and that's probably definitely due to the young age statement there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you were saying, like when I smelt it, I'm getting that notion of like a smokehouse. Like if you're hanging up salami to dry and you're smoking them, like I've never been in a smokehouse like that, but that's the smell I'm getting is associated with that. You're getting that, the dry wood that's been burnt.
Yeah.
So it's like smoke from dried wood as well as that savory meat.
Yeah, for me, it's like a very warm nose, something that like I'm very interested to get to the palate of.
When we first got the bottle, I cracked it open because I think it's always best to let
it oxidize a little bit.
Let it oxidize, let the whiskey open up. Like when I first opened the bottle, I was definitely getting like a peppery note. That's kind of been subdued a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that pepper note that you initially got is present in the palate, because if I can draw a comparison to Corrie Vrecken, which for me was a very, very strong pepper note on the palate. And I think if this is anything like that, if anything, it'll probably be a lot more prominent.
Yeah, like I am getting that little bit of a bite in the nose that you do get from pepper, but nothing that I would immediately characterize as being peppery.
Right, so the Wee Beastie here as well, bottled at 47.4%, so just over that 46% mark. You'd see a lot of Scotch whiskies usually bottled at maybe 43, 46%, so 47.4, we're just hitting over the traditional number you'd see there.
Yeah, and we pre-ordered this a couple of weeks before it arrived, so we were very excited for it to get here. So just to note some of the things that Ardbeg have told us to expect from the Wee Beastie. So reading directly off the Ardbeg website. On the snout, intense aromas of cracked black pepper mingled with sappy pine resin and sharp tangs of smoke. Suddenly, an explosive mouthfeel bursts forth with chocolate, creosote, and tar. Savory meats sink into the palate before the long, salty mouth-coating finish slinks away, revealing the inner beast of this Islay icon. Yes, to give all the listeners, all 2 or 3 of you at the moment, a bit of a background on ourselves. We have explored a little bit of Ardbeg's range previously. I have a bottle of Ardbeg Ugadal, which is nearing its end. Sadly. Am sad to say.
Yeah, sadly.
Yes, we will probably host a memorial service once it is finished. But we have also explored, Brad's got a bottle of the black. Oh, black.
Yeah, black. With black, that's another committee release there as well. well. So I've got a bottle of that, and I've also experienced Ugdal, as Daniel mentioned before, and Corrie Vrecken as well. So we've got a little bit of experience with Ardbeg, but as we mentioned, with our podcast here, this is a journey with us into the world of whiskey. So we haven't necessarily tasted or palated the Ardbeg 10, which is like a quintessential peated whiskey that you'd probably experience initially. And we haven't done that yet. We do things a little unconventionally here, but that's fine. We jumped in at a bottle that interested us, which was the Ugda. So something to just really stress and reiterate that when you're jumping into whiskey, jumping into scotch, find something that interests you, because that's probably where you'll get the most enjoyment out of. But as well, do your research. Don't just jump in blind. Islay is a very risky place to jump into because it can tarnish your experience with scotch, especially if you're not expecting it.
Yeah, so the thing you got to be really aware of is peat and smoke are two very different flavors. The best way I could describe it is, smoke is what you get when it comes off that dried wood that you're burning, whereas peat it carries a little bit more of that earthy, minerally tones to it.
For me as well, peat has a lot more bite to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd say would put a lot of people off, is that bite that peat carries.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with Islay whiskies, you will know that, bottlings like Lafrague, they carry that very minerally iodine kind of note to it, whereas you've got Lagavulin, which has the peat in addition to that smoke. Kalila, it's one of the most heavily peated ones, but it's also got that like oily tar feel that coats your entire mouth, which it does bring us back to the Wee Beastie, which they have noted that there is a tar finish.
Right, so in mentioning that, I'm hoping to see a long finish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to see something that envelops my palate and remains there for a while. That's what I'm hoping to see here. If they've mentioned that as something that's present and there, then I'm really hoping to see that, because if that's there, this could be a very, very good entry point into Ardbeg and into what they offer before you maybe jump into a higher price point of the Ugdal or the Corrie Vrecken.
Even in just smelling this, you can straight away tell it is quintessential Ardbeg.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's get into the palate here.
I mean, straight off the bat, it arrives so fast. It is like a punch in the face. I think their title of Wee Beastie
appropriate
is very appropriate.
Very appropriate. And with that first initial palate here, like Daniel said, it's a punch in the face. I've got pepper, I've got meat, I've got really everything. Maybe a bit of smoke as well. I'm actually presenting a little bit of smoke. But like Daniel said, it's coated the palate. It's all I can taste at the moment. But at the same time, the finish isn't too long. It's still there, but it's very, very tame.
Yeah, I've recently had a glass of Kalila 12. One of the palate notes on that is tar, and it's got a very long and oily finish. And that is if I could describe that, it just coats your entire mouth. So it is like saying, I'm here to stay. There's no getting rid of me. Whereas this does, as it hits you, it coats your entire mouth. It is very present, but yeah, as Brad mentioned, it kind of just disappears. I'm left with notes of smoke in the back of my throat. And I think that smoke, the smoky peatiness to it, that's very present in it, no doubt. By including tar in the palate, I get what they mean, because it's that, I'm trying to figure out a way to say it without it sounding kind of gross, because if you imagine eating tar, I don't think anyone could imagine eating tar.
Yeah, no.
But you get that kind of very dark, sooty, burnt smoke and peat that comes in the background.
Right, yeah. And for me, let me say, in an initial, I guess, response to the palette that I'm getting, would I dare to say slight disappointment in the finish for me? Anyway, slight disappointment. I'd say overall, initial impressions, very, very happy with this drop, but the finish might leave you wanting.
Yeah, I think if you're expecting a long finish with this one and a very mouth coating oily finish, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is a young whiskey, which you usually expect those kind of long finishes to come with a more aged whiskey. As a little bit more time in the cask, that develops a little bit more. Bringing this out at a 5-year-old, I would be surprised if it had a really long finish.
Yeah.
But I was still expecting it. So I would agree with you that I was looking forward to a little bit more of a longer finish, but that isn't very present here. And on another point, I know we did mention at the start of this that being at $85 might be a good entry point for Islay whiskies. However, if this was to be your first Islay whiskey, I would pray for you.
Yeah, definitely. This is probably something that would require prior experience with peat.
Yeah, I would look at investing a little bit more into a older whiskey, maybe looking at like a Lagavulin 16. That's probably that was my entry point into Islay.
Yeah.
So I would say it's one of the best options. I would say for hardcore Islay fans, this would be a good one that's at a reasonable price. So it's not necessarily an entry one, but
Yeah.
it is a great option if you're wanting a quintessential Ardbeg, but you don't necessarily have the disposable income to put on the table.
Yeah, so I mean, you know what they say, guys. Hindsight is 2020. So ignore what I said prior to that about this being a possible entry point. I mean, if your friend, if your mate, he's daring enough to jump into here, go for it. But just make sure you prepare them, you let them understand and know this is going to be a very strong arrival. This isn't maybe what you're expecting. And not only that, but I find like a lot of people maybe when they draw a connection to Scotch in their mind, that initial connection that they're drawing is peat, smoke. They're drawing that connection to smoke. But when they taste the smoke, they're like, no, I was actually thinking of Speyside. And Speyside's probably a more appropriate entry point. But like you said, to each their own. Peat is one of those things where it's love it or hate it. You love it or hate it. That's simple as that. You love it or hate it. But on the same scale, you can jump in and just enjoy it. Because for myself, I necessarily didn't have a huge experience or had sampled or tasted a huge variety of Scotch prior to jumping into peat. And I guess my first peat of whiskey was the Ardbeg Ugdal, and that I just fell in love. Peathead from then on. So it's just something that varies from person to person, palate to palate.
Yeah, and for me, like I started getting into Scotch or whiskey. Oh, yeah, I say whiskey, but I mean Scotch because that's what I was really wanting to drink. But I started getting into that as more of a novelty. I think I was young. I couldn't afford to buy Scotch regularly.
Yeah.
So it was just like that thing that we'd have at special occasions or events, or you're going out and you wanted to feel a little bit fancy, you ordered a Scotch. So it was usually just what I tried was based off what was the most popular. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that we were out one night and there was a very minimal whiskey list on this restaurant's options, and I decided to try the only one I hadn't tried, which was Lagavulin. And I mean, like, I was not prepared for a smoky whiskey, but when it hit me, I was just like, love at first sight. It was just like fell hard and was just straight up peathead from then on.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add a teaspoon of water to our dram here. And normally what we'll do is if we add a teaspoon of water, we're hoping to see a little more flavors maybe present themselves or just allow the whiskey to open up a little bit more.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of recommendations about different ways to experience and explore whiskey, trying it neat. Like, I mean, like we're 100% for drinking whiskey neat, but we have heard of the benefits of adding just like a teaspoon of water, 5 mils of water, to see how well that opens up the whiskey. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always good to just explore the way that whiskey interacts with water and see if it improves your experience at all.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I've already added water, Scotch mist present, so you know the non-chill filtration is there. And for me on the nose here, pepper significantly more present.
Yeah, that meat's kind of subsided and given way to a very peppery note, but also kind of like a sweet note. I'm getting some sweetness underneath that. Like the deeper breath I took, I was getting some sweeter notes. And I wouldn't say it's sugary sweet. I would say it's more of like a herbal sweet.
So maybe like a sweetness you'd associate with, let's say, another spirit, a Jägermeister. Would you say like a herbal in that sense or in that vein? No.
Kind of along that sense. So not exactly what you get from flowers or not what you get from sugar, but more what you get, from maybe even like a vanilla bean sweetness.
So for me on the palate with water, it's pepper. Definitely pepper. Now, could I draw a connection from the pepper that I'm experiencing here with the pepper that I experienced with Corrie Vrecken? It's similar, but a lot more tame, which for me, I was hoping for it to be a bit more strong and have a bit more bite, being a 5-year-old whiskey. Now, and the finish, it's very disappointingly dissipating very, very quickly with the water.
Yeah, for me, I'm like 100% that pepper comes across pretty prominent here. Now, I haven't tried, I was with you when we did the tasting at one of the shops nearby. While you tried the Corrie Vrecken, I had a try of the Ardbeg Dram. It was very known for its, I guess, more tropical fruity taste to it as opposed to the pepper. So for me, this is the strongest peppery whiskey I have tried. However, at the end, like I agree with you, the finish ends a lot faster once you've added water. But what I'm also picking up is that creosote note. I don't know if that's the proper way to say it, but it's that minerally element that's often found in the ground. Like now, I haven't gone out to ask to take a bite of creosote. So I don't know what that actually, I mean, like not going out and licking creosote. It depends the kind of ground we're talking about.
I mean, concrete, I'm all in.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. But what what I would associate it to the iodine that comes across in Laphroaig, that very chemically note.
Right. That's probably definitely more in line with that association you're drawing with creosote, as it's typically used in preservatives or antiseptics. So if you're drawing that medicinal kind of feel, which is definitely a note that you'd pick up in a Laphroaig.
Yeah, so if you're not a fan of that in Laphroaig, but you are tossing up whether to try Ardbeg Wee Beastie, I mean, like, it doesn't come across as much before the water, but after the water, it's definitely present.
Yeah, so if you maybe don't have a prior note to creosote in your bank that you're drawing from, you could probably associate it like close to a coal, and maybe that's where they're drawing that tar connection from. It maybe not necessarily be that tar, oily mouth feel that you'd associate with Kalila, but more a tar flavor that you'd associate with like a coal, right? Like, and it's more like that smell of coal, which is affecting your flavor of the actual whiskey itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the smoke that we were picking up before the water, that's kind of
that's
disappeared.
Gone. It's gone. Yeah. It's like it never was there.
I would almost say, I believe, like, even after adding the water, like, usually people would add the water to kind of dull down the edge of the bite that whiskey gives you, but adding the water to
this is the opposite effect.
It makes it hit harder. It's like you've enraged the beast and it is fighting back against your attempts to dilute it.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a reverse effect there. So maybe ease on adding the water, but that's just with us adding a teaspoon of water. Now if you're adding maybe like a glassful or whatnot, maybe that'll just completely dilute the whiskey, which it normally would.
Yeah, so if you're doing that, like, maybe don't.
Yeah, maybe don't.
Maybe don't. But yeah, like, if you're a fan of drinking whiskey neat, or if you're familiar with adding a little bit of water to seeing how much that opens the flavor, by all means experiment. But I would personally rather drink this without a drop or two of water. Like, I think, like, I enjoy that smoky,
right? Definitely
that comes across a lot more.
And I'm definitely in agreement with you there. Like, for me, it's just, look, water, it was a great to experience what that water did, how it mixed with the whiskey, and that's something that we're always going to do. We're always going to experiment and see how the water affects the dram, because I think that's really important, because water can bring out some notes, some characteristics that maybe just aren't present, right? And for us here, we've let it sit there. We've let it sit for quite a while. It's been well over 5 minutes. So really, generally for us, we let a whiskey sit in the glass for a minute for every year that it was in the cask. So for the Wee Beastie here, that's 5 minutes.
Yes, that's basically the minimum you'd want to do.
Yeah, that just lets it open up.
Yes, the other thing I would note is, while the Wee Beastie does, like, the finish is very short and it does leave, I'm also getting kind of like a hint, like, it is coming back. It is like almost trying to seek revenge, and I'm getting that smoked meats coming up kind of long after it's already gone. So it's interesting to note that while it does have a really short finish, it's also not going down without a fight.
Yeah, for me it's a very pleasant dram, even though I had some disappointment in the initial, I guess, dissipation of the finish. It's a very, very pleasant drop for me here.
Yeah, I would say, like, and my disappointment is entirely based on what I was going and expecting, because, as I said, like, the day before we tried this, I had a glass of Kalila, which was very well known for its oily tar notes that leave like a really long finish that coats your mouth. So when I went into trying this, I went in expecting that kind of finish, and to not get that was a little disappointing. But I think you're not going to be disappointed by this dram.
No, definitely not. You're not going to be disappointed. Definitely not. And if you love Ardbeg, this is something you should go out, seek a bottle, give it a go, because for me it presents a lot of the notes of what Ardbeg should be.
Yeah, exactly. And like Ardbeg, they haven't tried to dress this up. They haven't slapped on a fancy name, excluded an age statement, and bumped the price up. They've told you it's 5 years old. They've given it a price that you'd expect, well, cheaper than a lot of Islay whiskies as well. So I think it's quite reasonable what they've advertised and what they're asking for it. So personally, that's what I would rate it as. I'd rate it as a reasonable dram. It's classic Ardbeg, and it is undeniably an Islay whiskey.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess in relation to the names, they've thrown the Wee Beastie there. Great name. And I think with Ardbeg, they've really nailed the marketing in general. So they know what they're doing. Whoever's doing the marketing, you know what you're doing. We're in. We're all in. You know,
you've sold us. Like,
yeah,
you already had us.
Yeah, we're all in. So you can stop trying. We're all in.
Yeah, so I think the only thing left to do is, I guess, discuss, both for now and for our future podcasts, how we would rate whiskies.
Right, yeah, definitely. So I think we've come up with a scale of 1 to 10, right? So,
Easy.
yeah, simple, easy, right? Not 1 to 5, 1 to 10.
1 to 7?
No, 1 to 10. 1 to 10. We tabled 1 to 7, but maybe that was a bit too easy.
Yeah, I don't think it captures the entire complexity of what we need to rate, but 1 to 10, absolutely.
Right, yeah, 1 to 10. Way to go. All right. So we're looking at 1. That's disgusting. Binned it. Throw it in the bin. Not worth my time.
Just don't even bother finishing the glass. Just chuck the bottle straight out the window.
Right. And now number 2, poor. Wouldn't consume by choice. So, I mean, if you got me to a chair and you pour me a drink and it's all you got, then sure.
But you've got to know that's a pity drink. If you gifted it to me, I would re-gift it.
All right, so 3, that's bad. Multiple flaws, right? So you'd probably look at that and you think, well, it's below average, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's drinkable.
Yeah, I'd bring it out at parties if you knew you had people coming over who mixed their whiskies.
Yeah, probably very appropriate there. So number 4, average. Drinkable. Other drams I'd rather have.
So that's the one I'd bring out at parties if you had people you weren't super close with who would end up consuming that alcohol.
Right.
So you wouldn't be heartbroken if at the end of the night that bottle was empty.
Right. Yep. Then 5 is good. Just fine.
Yes, that's one I'd keep for if you had a couple of friends coming over, like a couple of closer friends, and you wanted to have something available so you wouldn't be heartbroken if a lot of them chose to drink it.
Yeah. Then 6, very good, a cut above.
Yeah, so I would say that's one that I would have on my shelf and I would use as my go-to whiskey. Like if I felt like having a dram without, just because I wanted to consume a dram without worrying too much about exploring or enjoying it, like that's one that I would have, or maybe I'd even have multiple of that. So if I didn't matter if as the night progressed, I got a little bit less discerning in my tastes.
Okay, yeah. So 7, that's great, well above average. So for me, this is something that I'm very happy to drink every day.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you want to do that now, but I would almost put Wee Beastie in the 7s.
Okay, yeah. For me, I'd maybe say it's a 6 for me.
6? Interesting.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's just because I've got that prior association with the Cove Reckon.
Right. Okay, so that peppery note and that tart finish kind of let you down and brought it down to the 6.
Yeah.
See, for me, like, it's not as rough as I was expecting a really young whiskey to be.
Right, and with the name Wee Beastie, I'm expecting something rough.
Yeah.
Like, go on, come at me.
Yeah, like if you give this to someone for first trying their whiskeys, it is going to send them running. Like,
yeah.
I almost don't doubt that unless you know they are like hardcore into spirits. But
yeah, but even like, the name Wee Beastie, I'm expecting, Night King standing on the shore, arms spread, come at me. But I didn't get that.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, for me, it definitely packed a punch, especially compared to other Islas. And I think that's because Isla whiskies, they're usually older in age. They usually are a bit more smooth, a bit more balanced than the Wee Beastie is. But for me, like, for giving it an age statement, for calling it non-chill filtered, for having it be natural colored, like, it ticks a lot of boxes if you're looking at spending money on a quality product.
Yeah, and for me, that roughness is probably more due to the age statement rather than the name Wee Beastie. So just,
Come here, little beastie. I'll protect you from the mean Brad.
So now back to the scale.
Yep.
So 8 is excellent. Quite exceptional.
Right, so I would say that'd be my one that I'd have on my shelf and I'd wanted to keep it for as long as possible, but it's one I'd also feel like a lot, so I would not stop myself from pouring a glass.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's probably where I'm at as well. So 9 is incredible. Our all-time favorite.
So I'd probably have that one as one that I would open up and try, because I don't believe in keeping bottles unopened.
Yeah,
because
no.
what's the point of not trying it? But I would bring it out when we'd have a podcast with a lot of listeners. Hint, hint, subscribe. Or like if I'm enjoying it with people I know who are massive whiskey fans.
Right, definitely. And, that's a view that we have here at Dram Talk, is that whiskey's made to be drank, don't just save it. And for us here, number 10 is perfect. Nothing else to say. It's just perfect.
So this is where I sit on the fence. Like, it's either one that you'd open, absolutely love, and would want to save it for special occasions, or is so good that you could not resist drinking it.
Yeah, for me, what would I say a 10 would be? Like, I don't think I'd necessarily have ever tasted a 10 in my experiences with Scotch so far. I'd say a 10 would probably maybe be something I'd always want to have in my collection. Always. Right. It's always present. It's always there. So it's always there, readily available for me to drink. And not only that, not only is it always present for me to drink, it's also something that's going to impress people. Something that's going to go, hey, like, you know what you're talking about when you're talking about Scotch.
So you're saying it needs to be something that transcends just what you like. It needs to be applicable to other people.
Yeah, I think that's something that's important, because if it's like your perfect whiskey, it's something that when you talk about it, you smile, right? It's like, this is something that if I look back on, I really enjoyed it and I want to share that enjoyment, that experience with other people.
Yeah, no, definitely get that. There are a couple of whiskeys I've tried that I would rate borderline 9, 9.5. I don't know if I'd push any to 10. Maybe we have to see on our future episodes whether the ones we've tried that I have in mind for my all-time favorites, whether they'd make it to that 10 ranking.
Yeah.
Suspense.
So maybe that's further down the line. We might find a 10. But at the moment, I definitely don't have any 10s.
But yeah, so if our ranking system resonates with you, we'd love to hear how you'd rank some of the whiskies you tried. Like maybe chuck in some of your all-time favorites, or just your general opinions about some that are maybe not as good. Or maybe ones you have in your collection have tried and would probably either recommend to people or would recommend not recommending.
Yeah, or if you have a 10, let us know what you think is a 10 and we'll give it a go.
We'd love to hear what people really love and we'd love to try that. Because isn't that what this is all about? Like, we love whiskeys, but more than just enjoying it ourselves, we love sharing it with other people, which is
definitely
why we share it with each other and why we've started a podcast.
All right, so in summary here, you've heard our rating system. Looking back on it, just reflecting, I might just bump mine to a 6.5. And, love it or hate it, it's 6.5 now. Get over it. I'd say it's a 6.5 just because I've had 6s and this is just a bit above that. But it's not a 7, and that's just due to my experience with the Corey Vrecken, which left me a little bit wanting with the Beastie.
Right. I would say it's narrowly scraped a 7 because, as I said, before we added water, it had very good smoky notes as well as that savory meats, which are, I guess, like unique to Ardbeg.
Right.
And so in trying it, it is undoubtedly an Ardbeg. It's undoubtedly an Islay whiskey. And it's reasonably priced. So I think that ticks all the boxes. The only thing that kind of was a bit of a minus for me was the finish, but I can't fault the Wee Beastie for that, if only because it is a young whiskey, and I know that finish is kind of improved as you age the whiskey for longer.
Just out of curiosity, so that's a 7 when you're factoring everything that we did. We added the water, and prior to you adding the water. So if we never added the water, is that just a solid 7? Because you did mention it was scraping a 7. So is that just a solid 7 or maybe even an 8?
I would say it is a solid 7 before we added the water. Like, if I never added the water, I would give that a 7 without a hesitation. And no doubt in my mind, that would make a 7.
Yep.
I would potentially look at moving it to a 7.5, but bear in mind that's only considering that I'm taking into account the fact that it is only 5 years, and a lot of the Islay whiskies are basically double that, if not more. So to pair this quality of a whiskey that is younger by more than half to like Kalila 12, Lagavulin 16, Lafrague 10, like putting it in the realm of all of these like heavy hitters, like this one holds its own. So I think they have created a great whiskey. It's aptly named and it's integrity bottling.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you there, just not with the rating.
Well, okay, we'll take this offline. Okay, so if you happen to already have a bottle of the Wee Beastie, or if you are listening to this once it's already released, so send us your thoughts to dramtalk.au@gmail.com.
Right, yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say, because this whole experience, this whole journey is really us voicing our opinions, our reviews, our thoughts to the world and people that care, because, our counterparts unfortunately do not care.
Yes, our significant others have
locked us in this room to make a podcast
where we will not be disturbing them, so we can tell other people who hopefully care as much as we do.
So pour another drum.